We'll start away. Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Invest in the US at Cork Chamber and SelectUSA, aimed at companies looking to or thinking of expanding their operations to an on-the-ground presence in the United States. For those who don't know me, which will be the vast majority, I'm sure, my name is Cathal McSweeney and I'm the International Relations Manager at Cork Chamber. First off, some housekeeping. Can you please make sure your mics are off? This is to help prevent any interruptions to the speakers. To be aware, this event is being recorded for our own purposes, and for your best experience, we suggest you use Zoom's speaker view. We have an exciting lineup this morning, starting off with a presentation from Conor Kenny of SelectUSA. Following Conor is Killian Crowley from OCO Global, and then we have more of a conversation piece with Sean Sheehan, the founder and CEO of WiseTech. This will be followed by a Q&A with all the speakers. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. We might bring you in at the end to ask questions yourselves, and we'll be wrapping up at 11 a.m. With that, I'd like to hand over to Conor Kenny of SelectUSA.
Excellent, thanks for that, Carl. I'm just going to share my screen here quickly. And thanks so much to you and the team at the Cork Chamber for bringing this together. I really appreciate it. I'm absolutely delighted to be talking here this morning. And as Cathal mentioned, my name is Conor Kenny, and I head up the inward investment arm of the US Embassy here in Ireland through an initiative called SelectUSA. And what SelectUSA is, it's the US government level agency that's responsible for trying to promote and support foreign direct investment into the United States. So easiest way to describe it to someone Irish, it's like the IDA equivalent, but for the US government. So a really, really interesting space to be in. So as I mentioned, I'm here in Ireland to try to support and promote Irish companies setting up, expanding and scaling in the United States. And how I do that, everything that I do kind of falls into two broad categories. First is the work that I do with companies themselves. And in this area, it's quite hard to define what it is that I do because every single company is different. But in essence, I'm here to try to resolve any issue that you as an Irish company might have when it comes to investing in the United States. And when we say investing, we mean actually setting up a physical location and hiring people locally on the ground in the US market. So we deal with companies from all sectors and companies of all sizes. Obviously, there's some prevalent sectors being in Ireland, things like construction, engineering, food, healthcare, technology. And then our services vary quite a lot depending on what stage a company's at. So say, for example, an early stage tech company comes to me and says, look, Conor, I'm looking to go to the US. I don't know where to go or how to get started. We can assist a company with that in that area with things like bespoke market research, trying to help identify a suitable location for them to set up and focus their business in the United States, help with incorporating the US entity, setting up a US bank account, any sort of tax, legal, immigration, accountancy advice they may need. And then if you could imagine, if we go up to a bigger company, a company who has hundreds or thousands of people already on the ground in the US market, we've got a completely different suite of services that we can offer a company like that. So that's one area we focus on. And the other area that we focus on, and I think it'd be good for the companies on this call just to be aware of how it works in the United States. So if you could imagine, we at SelectUSA, we sit at a federal level in the US. And what that means is that we've got a holistic view over all 50 US states. So if a company comes to us and ultimately sets up in New York or Florida or California or Ohio, whatever state it might be, it doesn't really matter to us because it all counts as US jobs created. Now there's a tier below us where every single state has what's called an economic development organization. It falls under the governor's office of that state. So really well resourced, really well funded, and all with a really unique set of incentives and supports to try to attract international companies such as yourselves to set up in their respective state. So we do a lot of work with them to make sure their offerings are applicable to Ireland. For example, last month we had the governor of Missouri in Ireland banging the drum saying, come and set up your company in Missouri. We've got the governor of New Jersey coming later this month as well. But also to make sure companies such as you guys, if you're interested in learning more about how the state of Florida, for example, can support you and incentivize your business, we can link you in with people locally on the ground there to do so. So just to elaborate a little bit more in terms of how we, SelectUSA, the US government, the US Embassy can support a company such as yours as you're looking west to the US. And the first thing I want to talk about is bespoke market intelligence. So as I mentioned, we can do research for companies. And just to elaborate on that in a little bit more detail. So we ultimately report back into the US Department of Commerce in Washington, DC. And within the US Department of Commerce, there's a dedicated research team whose sole remit and focus is to work with international companies, such as the ones on this call, get an understanding of what your routes to market are, what is important for you in the United States in terms of focusing your efforts, and try to highlight where there might be pockets of opportunity that you can take advantage of for you to set up your business in the US. Obviously, when we look west of the US, it's such a vast, big market. So it's critically important for a company when they're going over at an early stage to try to segment it down. And a big part of our job is trying to help educate Irish companies that, life exists outside the big metropolitan cities over in the United States. This is completely free of charge, and the reports are bespoke, as it says in the slide, depending on what the company needs for us. So, some common research points that people would ask us for would be things like, at a macro level, clusters of maybe emerging technology sectors in the United States, the availability of labor, the cost of that type of labor, availability of office space, connectivity from Ireland, and many, many other touch points too. Alongside that, we can provide insight into investment trends. So as I just mentioned there, we can showcase, if you're a med tech company looking to go to the United States, we can show you where there's established pockets and clusters of med tech industry in the United States, but also where there are emerging clusters as well that might be worthwhile for you to focus your business efforts and have capabilities in it. We can provide advice on the domestic market over in the US. Even though they speak a very language, it's very, very different in terms of how to do business. And also, obviously, the 50 different states have 50 different ways of trying to incentivize businesses to go in, as I mentioned, but also in terms of doing business within those states. And we can provide guidance and advice on that. I think by far and away, the strongest asset that we have at our disposal is our connections. I definitely don't know the answer to every question that gets thrown at me, but I'm usually 1 degree of separation away from someone who can provide real value for you on the ground in the US market. And one of the big things that we see and do here in Ireland is trying to put companies who are looking to go into the US with companies who are already established in the US market, because it's all well and good listening to me about how to do business in the United States. I've never actually set up a business in the United States, but we have a great network of companies who have been through it, have experienced the challenges, have come through the other side. And I think that peer-to-peer learning, and that's why it's so fantastic to have Sean from WiseTech on, who I'll try to get through this quickly because he's going to be the valuable one to listen to on the call, I think. We provide assistance with navigating the regulatory environment as well. So what that means is that we've got access into every single US federal department. So again, if you're a healthcare company and you want access to the FDA, we can provide access and try to get a contact for you to talk through maybe FDA approval process. If you're an energy company looking to get involved in a federal level project in the United States and learning more about the incentives and programs, we can put you in touch with the relevant people in the Department of Energy. And that's the same across every single regulatory body in the US market. And the final thing I wanted to say on this slide is that our job isn't just to land the company and say, off you go. We want to land that company, nurture it, support it, and make sure that it grows, succeeds, and scales in the US market. So all sounds great in theory. What does it actually mean? I just wanted to highlight some recent case studies of companies that we worked with who have invested in the United States. And the first one is a first-time investor. And the company I'm going to talk about here is a educational technology company here from Ireland who approached us maybe about 12 to 18 months ago saying, look, we want to internationalize our business. We're thinking of the US, we're thinking of Canada, we're thinking of the UK. We worked with that company to put together a report to showcase why the US would be the most appropriate market for them to scale into. They agreed with us and they said, look, where do we go? We don't have any idea how to get started. So again, we did a research report based on what their key drivers were to highlight some particular areas that would be applicable for them to focus their business efforts on. 3 different states came up out on top: Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, contingent on what our research report was. They were looking to really focus in on the East Coast, this particular company. So we linked them in with the governor's offices of those states, which I mentioned to you, to talk about, if they chose New Jersey or Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, how would they be able to support them? How would they be able to build out their network within that state if it was successful in terms of attracting this company? As all this was happening, if you can imagine, that was one parallel stream. On the other side, we were helping the company in terms of setting up the US entity, setting up the US bank account, putting them in touch with experts who could talk about immigration considerations, tax considerations, legal considerations. So ultimately, they came to the conclusion that they wanted to invest in Pennsylvania, and they've set up there in at University of Pennsylvania's accelerated program, where they're going to hire 10 people over the course of the next year. So, and obviously looking to grow over the US from there. Then the second case study I just wanted to showcase is how we support companies with an existing footprint in the US who are looking to expand. And we recently worked with a healthcare company in the US who have about 150 people in one location. They were looking to open up their second location in the United States. So again, we did some research to showcase where applicable places would be. We connected them in with the FDA because they had particular questions about opening up a second facility in it. And they actually chose to locate in Arkansas, which is a place that's not synonymous with Irish investment. And I think that was primarily driven by the data that we provided them and the connections as well. And the final one is the large scale investment. So, companies who have thousands and thousands of people on the ground in the US. We've recently worked with a packaging company who've invested over $1 billion over the course of the last 12 months in 3 different sites in the US. In this area, we'll make sure that they're connected directly in to the governors themselves of the states, the US Secretary of Commerce, the ambassador here in Ireland, to make sure that any challenge that they're having in the US market has been overcome. I am going to just quickly go through some trends that we're seeing in the US market with regards to Irish investment. And the first one is that we're seeing more Irish companies becoming cognizant of the challenges of trying to service the US market without actually having an on-the-ground presence there. I think this was exacerbated during the pandemic when there was a travel ban in situ for about 18 months in terms of Irish people had to apply for national interest exemptions to get over to US. And obviously this is so far from an ideal situation if you have US clients and customers that you need to serve through a traditional export model. So on the back of that, we're seeing more and more Irish companies actually choosing to set up a physical location, hiring people there. That's backed up by the numbers. In 2017, there was about 450 Irish companies in the US. Today, there's over 700. So that's a phenomenal jump in the space of 5 years. And as we're seeing more Irish companies going there, we're seeing a much greater geographical spread of where they're choosing to locate. As I mentioned to you, we just worked on a company locating in Arkansas. We've seen investments in Oregon, in Texas is a big one, obviously, at the moment, in Mississippi and Alabama. Big part of my job is trying to showcase that life and opportunities exist across all 50 US states, which I mentioned before. A really common route to market that we're seeing as well from Irish companies, and it's quite unique to Ireland, is that we're very fortunate that we have such a multitude of US multinationals operating in the Irish market. So a lot of Irish companies are working and servicing these companies in the Irish market, then leveraging these relationships and trying to serve the same company in the US. Phenomenally strong and successful route to market from companies that we've dealt with, because it obviously means that you've got a few big anchor clients in the US when you go into it, and a proven track record of delivering results for them. The final thing I'll say is that we're seeing more and more Irish companies as well choosing to locate in the US and then export into other international markets from the US market, places like Asia, South America. That's again something that we can support a company if it's interested in doing. The final thing I just wanted to talk about, and then I'll shut up, is the SelectUSA Investment Summit, which is coming up from June 26th to 29th in Washington, D.C. and is a phenomenal event, I think, for any company looking to go and invest and set up in the United States. It is a great event for you to maybe consider. So the first question is, what is the SelectUSA Investment Summit? So every year ourselves here in Ireland, along with about 80 different international markets, we bring embassy-led. This year, I'm delighted to say that the new US ambassador to Ireland, Claire Cronin, who has family ties to Cork, of course, is going to be leading the delegation of companies across to Washington, D.C. for a 4-day program where the overarching objective of the summit is to try to make it as easy as possible for you as an international company to succeed in the US market. So who will be there? So there's, as I mentioned, there's about 80 different international markets. We bring about 2,000 companies across to it. Alongside us then, it's the one event of the year that convenes all 50 US states under one roof. So if you're interested in learning about opportunities in 5, 10, 15 different states, phenomenal opportunity for you to meet these people face to face and blitz it all. Ultimately, at the end of the day, in terms of who will be there, any question that you have about doing business or challenge that you have in the US, there should be someone at the summit who we'll be able to connect you with, who'll be able to resolve that answer for you. In the past, it has the support of the US, the highest echelons of the US government. In the past, the president himself has delivered the keynote address at the summit. I suppose the critical question is, why should you attend the summit. And I suppose there's three real benefits to going across and being across previously for companies. Firstly is the chance to learn about the US market. So across the 4 days, there's talks, workshops, roundtable sessions focusing on every component of doing business in the US, from how to set up a business, investment opportunities in rural America, all the way down to sector specific. So there's industry focus this year on things like healthcare, food, and other sectors as well. So phenomenal opportunity to learn about opportunities, challenges, and fact find in the US. If you went across just for the talks, it might, if I'm being honest, it probably wouldn't be the best use of your time. But the other two real benefits are, as I've mentioned to you previously, all 50 US states are there under one roof. So a chance to meet with all of these ones that you feel are relevant to your business. And the final thing is just the networking that gets done between the Irish companies themselves. So there's Irish companies of every stage there, from the Kerry groups, the Ardas of this world, all the way down to companies that don't have anyone on the ground. We make sure to try to bring the delegation together as much as possible. The Irish ambassador would usually host us for a reception, his residency. We'd all go out for dinner and drinks one night. As I previously mentioned, there's no substitute for that peer-to-peer learning. So a great chance to build out your network in the US. This year as well, and I'm nearly finished, so bear with me. This year as well, there is a particular focus on supporting early stage technology companies and also international women and founded technology companies. So there's a discounted rate for companies that operate in this area, but there's also that which gets them access to the full SelectUSA summer program, but also allows them to participate in the option if they want to exhibit and pitch at the SelectUSA Investment Summit. And then the SGWIT there, that's called SelectUSA Global Women in Tech. So any women founded and run business gets access to a mentorship network in the US to try to support those kind of businesses as they grow across the US market. It will take place from June 26th to 29th in Washington, DC. And if you have any interest in registering or learning more about it, just please feel free to reach out and contact me directly. So that's everything. And I'll hand back over to you, Cal. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Connor. Some really good information there. And the SelectUSA Summit is such an important opportunity for companies looking to invest in the US. Remember, if you have any questions for Connor, put them in the chat box as he's staying around for the Q&A, or else hold on to them. You can ask it yourself at the end of the session. I'm now going to hand over to Killian Cawley of OCO Global.
Morning, everyone. Great to have the opportunity to be here today. And I think it'd be an awful lot better if we were there in person as opposed to virtually. So great to be here. I just want to make sure, can everyone see my slides there? Is that okay, Carl?
Yeah, if you just put on presenter viewer, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, perfect.
We're okay there. Great. Technology gremlins are still alive and well, so I'm not going to keep you too long. I want to just give you a very quick overview and just some important pointers for consideration when looking at exporting in the US market. And we'll just take a quick look on the economic development organizations again, as Connor has outlined, and how Connor and SelectUSA and other economic development organizations can assist and support your companies and Irish companies on their export journey. So who is OCO Global? Well, we are an Irish SME, and we help companies grow internationally. We're a private economic development consultancy, and we specialize in international trade. We're on the go for about 20 years, and we have over 150 staff working across the whole world in terms of a very strong global footprint. And I suppose it's just important to mention, it's very important, and Connor has touched on it as well, to be in market. And we have found that for companies, it's crucial that you're there to understand the cultures, traditions, and as well as know what's happening in business on the ground. So that international footprint is very, very important.
Sorry, Killian, could you just press the presentation view again there, please?
Sorry about this. How is that?
Still the same.
If you hit, see where it says from the beginning there, Killian, on the left at the top.
Yeah, here we go again.
Yeah, it's not working.
Sorry, I'm going to just stop sharing and I'll come back in again. Sorry, we had a little bit of an issue at the start, so apologies on that. Now, is that any better?
Perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Great. Lovely. The gremlins are really alive this morning, so apologies on that. Okay. So Exporting was never easy, and thanks to COVID, it's got an awful lot more complex, and the landscape has changed completely out there. And you know, we see, I suppose, some of the key areas where the new normal is lying now is the changing consumer trends. We're seeing more and more in sustainability, hybrid working, and we're obviously seeing an awful lot more in e-commerce. So that whole world is changing quite a lot. We're seeing a huge amount of changes in supply chain issues, and this is leading to longer lead times. And obviously we're hearing words like reshoring and nearshoring, and this is having an awful impact as well on exporters. Cash flow and financing pressures, we're obviously seeing huge amount of impact in terms of having to carry extra inventory and make allowances for all that's involved with that there. And that's obviously increased financial risk. Obviously, our friend Brexit hasn't gone away, and it's depressing that keeps on giving. And that's having knock-on impacts. And as well as that, obviously the terrible events in the Ukraine, we're only starting to see the impacts of what they are on business. And again, geopolitics is having an effect on every business, whether you're in Ireland or further afield. So I suppose the challenges that we're seeing for SMEs, you know, we're seeing that there's obviously a number of three key areas we see that you need to be looking at. You need to be more strategic. Where we were probably more opportunistic and reactive in the past, we actually have to be a lot more strategic now. We actually have to have a plan for growth. We need to commit to that plan, and we need to make sure we're allocating resources in the right places to make sure we're getting the best benefit out of that. For exporters and new exporters, flexibility is another key area. It's important to be flexible, to listen, to learn. And particularly every country is different. And what works in Ireland doesn't necessarily work in other countries. And we see that in America. We see that across different states in America. So it's very, very important that you're actually listening to your customers and that you're positioning your offer accordingly for the new market. And as Conor has mentioned earlier on there, buyer engagement is very important. And really what that's coming down to is finding a way to be on the ground, finding a way to be representative on the ground, whether it's through a third party or partner, or even setting up your own local presence. Traveling across by plane every now and again is very important, but it's very important there to build trust for potential customers, to be there to support them and to build those relationships. It comes down to relationships, and it's very, very important. So just to make sure that you are all still awake, what has this chap in the USA got in common? Well, very simply, they're huge. The US market is essentially 50 countries in one, and you really do need to do your homework. And when you look at, you know, California is the size of Brazil, Texas, Australia, Illinois, Saudi Arabia, New Jersey, Poland, Michigan, Austria, and Georgia, Belgium. You can see the extent of the size of the US. And I suppose the advice that I would give here, and the advice that we've seen down through the years, it's not all about the size of the market. It's about how you enter the market, and entering the market, as Conor has said, the right way for your particular company. And it's important that to understand that every state has, there are probably a lot of industries and sectors that are a little bit stronger than some of the other states. And it's important to identify which state is suitable for your company. And again, that's done through market research and intelligence. The likes of Georgia is very strong in the area of logistics. Maryland is very strong in cybersecurity. Missouri, as Conor's mentioned earlier on, very strong in agri-tech and agriculture. So it's very important to understand which state suits your company the best, and to be able to do the research and make sure that you're entering the market in the right place. In OCO, we have a broad range of companies or of states that we work with right across the US. So we represent approximately 17 states in the US, and we act as their Enterprise Ireland and IDA. And as Conor has mentioned there, that we've seen quite a lot of states actually visiting Ireland and visiting Europe, and we're starting to see a lot of trade activity both ways. And a lot of these states here are actually looking for us as well to attract investment into them as well. So we work with the likes of Ohio, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, and they are all very, very active at attracting business into their particular states. And it's in their interest to attract growing companies that are going to grow the economic footprint within their state, but also increase jobs within their states as well. So economic development organization, essentially they're dedicated to the economic development of a particular region. They want to grow jobs, and they want to help you. And what we found all the economic development organizations that we work with, they're very, very interested in meeting Irish companies that are serious about setting up in the state. They're very happy to look at a number of different areas to help companies, and just wanted to take a few minutes just to actually go through what that is. And as Conor has outlined in his case studies, these economic development organizations will help companies from a very early stage right up to very well developed companies that are employing hundreds of people. So it doesn't matter where you are on your journey. They are very, very interested in actually speaking and talking to companies that are looking to set up in their states. So the areas that we've seen that they've been very active in, and I'll just touch on a few here that I feel are relevant for this morning, is site and office selection. So office selection can be anything from a WeWork type arrangement where it's just one office to have a presence in the particular state, right up to identifying a site where you're going to build a factory. So they're very, very good at that. Local introductions, local networks, local ecosystems. There are so many different clusters in a lot of these states that are relevant for Irish companies coming over. And it's very important to be able to locate actually beside these, because from a business development point of view, it's a great opportunity. Another area that shouldn't be overlooked is in and around R&D and innovation. There are a lot of universities out there in each of these states that are very keen to work with companies and develop innovations and develop R&D. An area that we all have an issue with in business is skills and staff sourcing. And again, the states generally will help. And a lot of states will actually have a pool of very particular types of skills, whether it's computer programmers or pharmaceuticals. It just depends on the state. And again, they're very, very helpful in relation to those areas. And I just mentioned one state in particular, Georgia, who has a quick start program, what they call their quick start program. They actually will train specific staff for you for free. So they will tailor a course with a local education authority to help train your staff to make them to make sure that they're up to speed for your industry, and they will do that free of charge. So some other areas Conor mentioned about market research and intelligence, obviously a very important area, and they do have a huge amount of information that they're very happy to help with. They'll also provide advice on local market costings, and this is something that's important, particularly from a planning point of view. And they will give you very good handle on wages, salaries, rents, utilities, and various different other costs in the local market as well. Obviously, there's the tax incentives, and every state has their own. And again, it's something that you would look at on a case-by-case basis. And then, obviously, as Conor said, they don't just want to get you in there, they want to keep you there, and they will provide day-to-day assistance and growth and support. So it's very, very important to understand that they are there to help. And another area just I want to really highlight this morning in the short time that we have is, it's so important to have an export plan. And in OCO, we use a very simple model. And I think it's just something to take away from today, just in terms of having in your own mind. And I'm sure Sean will talk to this later on. Assessing the market, entering the market and growing the market. It's a holistic approach we want to take with exporters. Back to the market intelligence, I think this is one of the things that you're going to hear a lot of, and don't underestimate how important it is. We really do emphasize the importance of identifying the right entry point for your company, the right place to do business, and that is one of the key first steps to make. Then you have your go-to-market strategy in terms of identifying the best way to enter the market. Then you have all the other areas in and around compliance, localization, and localization is a very important part. That's from everything from your marketing material to how you position your product. And then everything then from logistics and pricing as well. And again, going into a new market, you really have to make sure that you're on point in all those particular areas. And probably one of the most important areas after market intelligence is your value proposition. So how you as a company position your offer to companies and the end user in the new market. So there's a lot in and around that. You need to be very clear who your end user is, who your end customer is, and make sure that you have the right messaging to get to that customer, knowing who your competitors are and knowing what your strengths are in comparison to your competitors. And ultimately, this is about approaching the right partners and targets to grow your business and to make sure that your business then is it's a sustainable long-term relationship within the market. So making sure that's a network for growth that you have established. So again, that presence on the ground is very, very important. And Conor mentioned earlier on there, we work with EDOs on a very practical and operational level as well. So a couple of things to point out here. It's extremely important to be getting the right advice. And I know as a lot of Irish companies, we tend to try and maybe avoid paying for advice sometimes, but particularly in the US market, paying for advice is an investment in the future. Particularly from a legal point of view, making sure you get the right legal advice, but also from a financial and accountancy side of things as well. It's so important to get that right advice to start, make sure you're properly set up, to make sure that you have the right contracts for sale and that you have the right advice from the very outset. And then everything else from banking and finance to finding office staff, etc. Again, these are all very practical, but supports are out there and are available to you. So just wanted to touch on a couple of companies that we would have worked with, and again, just to make it a little bit more real. Cameramatics are a provider for driver and fleet management and intelligence solutions, and they entered the US market probably about 3 years ago, and we worked with them very much on their US market strategy, and we took very much the assess, enter and grow model. And we took the approach that we would set up on the Eastern Seaboard initially, and that we would do it on a state-by-state basis, given the size of the US market and particularly for their particular offer. So we worked with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership in Virginia, and they provided local office, introduced us to new staff, and introduced the company then to a number of trade associations that really sort of kicked off business and got a good, strong presence on the ground. And since that, we have been speaking to Florida, Georgia, and a number of other states in relation to setting up operations within each of those states. And again, those states are offering various different levels of assistance, from recruitment offices to introductions to various different business clusters and associations. So again, you can see just how important the economic development organizations are there to supporting and helping. Another company that we would have worked with from Northern Ireland, Smiley Monroe, and they are specialists in manufacturing conveyor belts for construction and materials handling industries. And their requirement was more in terms of identifying a site in the US to build a manufacturing facility. And again, that involved site selection, nationwide mapping to see where suited them for their business and their particular customer base. And essentially, we ended up settling in Kentucky, and they have a manufacturing facility there now, and they're employing over 50 staff. So again, the Economic Development Organization, working in conjunction with OCO and the company, was very important in terms of helping identify the right entry point for them and the right supports around that. So again, this is all about real value add. It's about growing sustainable business and really adding to growth in sales. And again, it's so important to make sure that you get the right entry point and you have the right plan to do that and that it's sustainable. So in summary, just to leave you with a couple of pearls of wisdom, just in our experience, I suppose, avoid biting off more than you can chew. Really understand where is the best entry point for you. The US is a huge market, as I've outlined, and it's so important that you do pick the right area. Don't fall into the trap of someone I met on the plane told me that is not market research. Get the proper market intelligence, get the proper market research for your particular market. And as I outlined earlier on, COVID has changed how markets operate. They have changed how consumers think, and the trends that have happened in the past are different trends now. So it's very important to do that market research and have that intelligence. Avoid the legal trap, as I've outlined. Naivety is no excuse when it comes to commercial arrangements. Get the right advice, pay for the advice, and it's an investment in the future. Another area just is, again, that localization piece. Don't get lost in translation. You need to make sure you adapt your offer for that particular market and be aware of the cultural differences. One of the companies we worked with, we found, again, a simple word as like accident. In the US, an accident actually means that you're admitting liability. So again, a single word can have such a knock-on impact on your company. And if that's on your website or on your marketing material, that can have a very detrimental effect on your positioning within the market. Another area just to touch on is you do need to have realistic expectations and timelines and resources to support it. You need to stick the course. This is a journey. You will get setbacks, as the world has shown us over the last number of years. I don't think any of us had expected Brexit. We definitely didn't expect COVID, and the Ukraine war is obviously another challenge along the route. So, you know, these are unexpected. They do affect timelines, and it's important that you have built in an assessment for things that can go wrong. And ultimately, back to having an export plan, I have to say that is probably one of the most important things to take away from this today. And the old saying of fail to plan is plan to fail. And I think in this instance here, it's never been truer. So I'm going to wrap up now. I appreciate you all for listening. And if you have any questions at the end, I'm very happy to answer them for you. So thanks very much for your time. Back to you, Carl.
Thanks very much, Cillian. Again, a lot of important insights from Cillian's extensive experience there. And remember, if you have any questions for Cillian, please throw them into the group chat and we'll come back to them in about 10-15 minutes. With that, I'm delighted to introduce Sean Sheehan, CEO and founder of WiseTech. Good morning, Sean. Just to start off, I suppose, can you tell me a bit about WiseTech and the company's US journey to date?
Yeah, well, WiseTech is an IT recycling and data sanitization company. So we manage everything from mobile phones, iPads, laptops, all the way to data center equipment. We officially opened in 2008. Our headcount at the moment is about 448, and we're close to about 200 people in the States now. Our headquarters is in Cork. We have 11 facilities in total. So we've 4 in Cork, 1 in Dublin. We've 1 in Thailand, 1 in the UK, and 4 in the USA. Like we first entered the USA in Boston in 2014, and we followed one of our customers over there, and they kind of gave us a soft landing really to get in there, and we're still there. So it's working okay for us. We set up in Austin then in 2018. Again, we followed the customer over there. We actually got a contract over there, so we set up beside the company that gave us the contract. And Virginia and Sacramento in 2019. Sacramento, we needed a presence in California. As we know, like the Silicon Valley is an important area. You have a lot of tech companies there. It's a lot of headquarters there. So Sacramento was probably, from our point of view, was probably the best area to set up because it was cheaper. Access to people was important at the time. And it's worked quite well for us, and we're very happy with that facility. It's about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. Our growth would probably, we see it in the States, so we're certainly looking at our opportunities out there. And if the case rises again, we probably will set up additional facilities over there. The thing about the US is that when if you do get a contract over there, there's no such thing as a small contract. It's generally a big contract. And generally, the fact that you're coming from Europe, there's a good chance that you'll probably get the global contract as well.
Truly global at the moment, so all over the world and well embedded in the US. I know you had a soft landing with a contract that you already had here, or a company. So how did you navigate the initial US market, I suppose, at that point or just after that point? And what advice would you give to companies planning their first expansion into the US?
I mean, it's been said numerous times already, location, location, location. It's important that people do their homework. Like, you need access to workforce, whether it is white or blue collar, access to your customers, access to an airport that has a direct flight from Dublin is handy, but you don't always get that, but it is useful because there's nothing worse than hanging around the airports, particularly in the US, because you can miss your flight the odd time. Again, it's as we mentioned, the homework and like there is business development organizations in each state and also in the local districts there. So it's important you work with them because there is incentives and there is grants. Now, if you have an open mind and you're not sure what state you want to go to, that's the best situation because these guys will work with you and they all want to get your business. So they'll do whatever they need to do to attract you to their state or their local district. So it's important that you work in these areas. State grants tend to be bigger, and it's again, like it's all down to the amount of people that you can hire out there would probably determine the size of the grant that you will actually get. And you get grants around so that they'll help you with rental, they'll also help you with training. So, but it's always worth checking that out when you are looking at setting up.
You mentioned business development organizations, but were there any other support organizations like SelectUSA or Enterprise Ireland that you found to be particularly helpful from this side when setting up and expanding your US business?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like SelectUSA is always a great place to start, and I think Conor mentioned it earlier on. Like there's a summit every year around the end of June, and the good thing about this summit is that you have all the states, and they're all there, and they're all looking for business. So if you can go in with an open mind and start talking, you have a couple of states in the back of your head, maybe that you go in and talk to these guys, they will do their best to attract you to their state. So they're all represented there, but you also get, there's very good presentations there on structuring your business in the US. You get a lot of information around visa. Like visa is very important, because if you are setting up there, you'll want to send a few expats out there, which is important. So if you want to maintain your culture and you want to get the right information back to headquarters and all that, like it's important you have your own person in the ground at the very start, and they're feeding all the information back to you. Again, another Enterprise Ireland, we found them great. We always use them when we're setting up in an area to give you connections to local businesses that are already, particularly Irish businesses that are already set up, so that alleviates any pitfalls that you might come across, both legal and financial. By talking to local businesses is always the best way. We actually did it. We went to Thailand as well, and we set up there very quickly because of that. Enterprise Ireland are great as well for networking. They can connect you with local businesses, local business people. The thing about the US, and we all know it coming from Ireland, like the amount of Irish people out there and Irish connected, they love the Irish. You know, it's a great resource having Enterprise Ireland over there. They're dotted all over the US, and the connections that they have and they can give you is actually incredible. The networking, the business briefings they have, certainly would sign up with these guys. And there's also, if you need a professional company, there's a company called Trade Bright to help companies set up markets and do some marketing in the States, and they can help you out as well. But certainly SelectUSA was definitely a good starting point.
Thanks. And what do you feel were the biggest challenges when you're choosing to invest in the US, or like even when you're on the ground, the kind of initial kind of couple of months? What did you find that was surprising or challenging, or was different to Ireland?
Again, it's all information gathering, like watching local taxes. They can differ a lot. Like in some cases, like some property taxes can pick up the value of the inventory on site as well as the value of the property. So you have to be careful of stuff like that happening out there. And it's well worth getting it checked out. Like if you're doing e-commerce, like you pay e-commerce, the taxes paid in the state where the equipment is sold. Labor laws, you have to be careful, like if especially people working from different states now, working from home and all that, like they differ in every state. You know, so payroll and all that can be complicated. It's where the employee resides. Like your 401k clubs out there, health plans are very different to Ireland, and they need to be managed. There's good outsourcing companies there that we use, and they're certainly, because it's very hard to get all this information together. So we outsource some of that. We use companies that are out there that will help us on that side of things. You know, so they're really what you need to look out for.
So I suppose when you're scaling, you've already invested in the US, that's one of the biggest challenges, especially if you're going across into different states, the kind of different laws, the kind of different opportunities that are around from state to state.
Yeah, well, there's certainly challenges there. Again, having expats on the ground is always a big help. You know, no matter what state you go into, because it's, as I said, the information you get back is always very helpful. Hiring people is the difficulty. We're finding that out there now. It's a bit like here in Ireland. It's tough at the moment getting people and trying to retain them. Then is difficult at the moment as well. So you need to be careful of that. The work visa, I mentioned that already. It's very complex, particularly if you're getting them for expats, and you need if they're there long term. You can do it yourself. We don't. It's a lot of work involved. It's difficult. So we just hire local solicitors that specialize in this. Again, SelectUSA can help you with that. They can give access to a number of solicitors that actually work with work visas. Choose your state wisely. We've said it numerous times at this stage. Again, and the employment hiring, they're the biggest things for us and the biggest challenges that we would have out there.
Thanks. Before we get to the chat box there, I think Connor has his hand up there and wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And just to I suppose build on what Sean's saying. Sean, just a question a little bit off script, sorry, but just obviously when you're taking into tax and legal considerations and also the immigration considerations, I know that you're a global company with global operations. Would you, for an early stage company looking to scale its business, say for example, it's looking at its first international expansion and they're looking at the UK or the US, wherever it might be, would you say that the US is an easy place to do business in comparison to other markets around the world? Or how would you see that?
Well, it's a big marketplace. It's not too bad. But once you're set up and you decide what state you're going to, then you have a vast market right in your doorstep. You know, like it's huge. You know, so like once you get in there and once you get your legal side of it, your tax, your company set up, the corporation set up, and you have all that work done, then you have opportunities, huge markets there. You know, so like you use the likes of SelectUSA and Enterprise Ireland to get the connections, and like Irish people will help you out. Even the Irish people that are gone decades ago, like, you know, they'll all help, and it's a great door opener to use the Irish thing. Like it definitely opens doors, and we'll be always looking for that help and who's who, or attending networks event, getting, you know, you're surprised what you pick up. And like there's Irish people and they're very high up in organization up there and running businesses out there that will always help, you know, so like it's a huge marketplace.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the point. I think that, you know, it's, even though it might look daunting and kind of complex from the outside, if you do work with the support agencies, if you do build out your connections and your network of Irish companies who've been there and get that kind of support, and as you said, the reward, you know, I think the US is 20% of the world's economy on its own. If you look at California, I think it'd be like the fourth biggest economy in the world if it was on its own. So the reward is well worth putting in the effort and trying to focus and getting it right. So thanks for that, Sean.
Yeah, and I think also, like, if you do get a contract over there and you are coming from Europe, there's a good chance you'll get a global contract as well. So because if they've taken you on in the States and they see you have global connections, then there's a good chance you'll get a global contract, and that's what we're seeing as well over there.
We're just going to move to the chat box there, Sean. There's questions coming up from Alana Carthy, and it's about staffing, I suppose. Did you move any staff or sponsor staff to relocate to the US, or did you hire on the ground only?
Oh no, we had a lot of expats over there. It was quite a lot of them, because it's important that you maintain your culture, and that you know, if we have processes that we want to develop in the US and we've already established them in Ireland at the time, you have to get set up and get engineers over there, and we did a lot of that. We did a lot of it with apartments in different states. Beside our facilities, we house people over there. It can be expensive because you have subsistence, you have the cost of the rental, you know, you got to pay the guys. So it can be, but you get the rewards back by having your culture and embedding our principles, you know, our value add, value proposition, all that. So it's all very important.
And how did you find the process of bringing people over there?
It is, as I said, the visa part of it is slow. We used professional help, and we still do use professional help in that. There's a lot around it. It costs, but you know, you get the value because it's done properly, it's done right. It's not over and back and being rejected the whole time. So that's generally what we would use. Again, SelectUSA will help you on that side of it, and they'll give you advice on that, you know.
And before we open up the chat to Connor and Killian again, there's one more from Alana here. Did you find the cost of setting up in the USA a surprise? Was it more or less than you thought, or was it what you budgeted for, I suppose?
Again, it depends on your state. Again, you know, the rental costs do vary. Like, it depends how close you need to be to the city, and how, you know, and what state you're going to. We checked all that out, and so we know exactly, you know, what the costs were going to be, so we're able to budget for it. Again, with people, and the states do vary when it comes to wages and all that. Like, for instance, California it can be expensive. The labor laws are very strict out there, while if you're down maybe further south and all that, it's a lot easier, and it wouldn't be as difficult. So you need to look out for things like that.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Connor and Killian to come back in, and if anybody has a question for any of our three speakers, could you either raise your hand, or and then you can ask them yourselves, or else just throw your question into the text box.
As we're waiting for that, Kat, if I could just say, on the visa side of things, obviously working in the embassy, I work very closely with the consular team here in the embassy. So if people there's just a delay at the moment around visas because there's a backlog on the back of the pandemic and having to adhere to restrictions, social distancing restrictions in the embassy. So if this is something that's going to be coming down the line, I definitely recommend people to get the ball rolling on the process as quick as possible in terms of getting it across the line, just in terms of the delays that they may face. And then also, just to come back to Alana's question on costs, if you've got particular cost considerations like costs around office space, labor, whatever it may be, we can support you with SelectUSA by doing some research and benchmarking different locations that might be of interest to you in the US, depending on what those cost indicators might be.
Just can I come in there, Carl? Just a couple of quick things just to reinforce just what Sean has said. Just Enterprise Ireland, as Sean has said, do not overlook Enterprise Ireland. They're fantastic in terms of the support that they provide, and they should be contacted at all costs. And also, just in terms of people, I think that's very important what Sean has said about culture. We've found that very much with all the companies that we work with. It's very important to maintain that culture, even though there will be a certain amount of local staff employed. It's very important to try and keep that your corporate culture present there, and it's something to obviously keep in mind, and particularly the skill sets as well, to make sure that you have the proper skill sets and the way of the work ethic as well, because sometimes that can be a little bit different as well, and that can be a shock for companies from Ireland moving over, and it's important just to reinforce that. And as well as that, the costs as well, just be prepared that wages and employment law are different in the US, and just to make sure that you have a good understanding of what that is. So just to reinforce what Sean has said there. Thanks
very much, Killian. I suppose, Killian, sticking with you there a second. In your presentation, you emphasised it was so important where you enter the country. What questions should companies be asking themselves when trying to identify the entry point? What are the real basic or the initial questions?
Where I would start with companies very much around what is their offer, what sector are they in, and really being very, very clear on what that is. You know, if you're a provider of you know, whether it's a med tech product or, you know, or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, you really need to be clear who your end user is, who's your end customer, and do your market research around that. So you need to be very, very crystal clear and identify a particular state or states that would be appropriate for you there. And as Sean has said, then it's coming in then to cost. And other supports that are available through the economic development organizations that are there to support you. Each state is different. The tax laws are different. The employment laws can be slightly different. So really you need to filter down from that. But you really do need to identify based on your value proposition and who your end customer is going to be. So what is your value and where is your uniqueness, and identifying then where you would sit within the competitive landscape within those particular states, and filter it down from there.
So identifying like kind of clusters of where your industry is mainly and what kind of supports are offered then.
Yeah, where is your end users? Where potentially are where's the easiest point of entry to get to your target customers? That would be my starting point in all. So if you take the likes of Cameromatics, we looked at the state of Virginia, we looked at the state of Georgia. The reason why they went there was because that had the highest logistics number of logistics companies in the US, the highest number of trucks, the highest number of fleet users, and they were their target customers, and that's where they wanted to go. So that's where they basically started their starting point. So again, they identifying where their key customers were.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Connor, if I can move to you for a second. You mentioned how you engage with people, companies, not just at their initial investment, but kind of bring them through the process. From your engagement with these companies who have been in the US a while, what is their feedback about the biggest surprise or how they've had to adapt to life in the US or working in the US?
I think the cultural side of things is really important for people to take into consideration. And obviously, it's a similar language, but as I alluded to earlier, it's very different in terms of mindset. And being Irish obviously is a real advantage over in the United States. It will get you the meeting, but people also always tell me it will not get you an actual contract, even though it gets you the initial meeting as well. So I'd say that the biggest surprise for a lot of people when I'm talking to them, I think, is just how different the culture is in the US. But if you ask the vast majority of companies that I deal with that have existing operations in the United States, if you say what is one of the critical components of them being successful in the US, the vast majority of them, and I'm sure Sean will agree with me, is to actually have an on-the-ground presence in the US to service their clients and customers, which is critically important, I think, for any business that's looking to gain real traction in the market over there.
Good. Thank you very much. Given the time there, I just one last question for each of you, and you probably already emphasized this point, just give you one last opportunity to hammer it home. If you wanted people to have one takeaway from today's call, from your perspective, what would that be? And I'll jump to Sean there first.
I think we've probably said it numerous times at this stage. It's location. Where your customers, your market, the costs, all that. Location.
Brilliant. And Cillian, to you?
Yeah, but what Sean's saying there, I think it all falls into the export plan, and location is going to be a key part of that. Your value proposition, everything costs, everything falls into that plan. So have a plan.
And Connor, finally to you, and if you say location, I can say location.
I'm not, I'm sorry, I'm going to ruin it for you. I'm going to just say that there's a really common misconception out there that a lot of companies think they're too small to get these supports from the US government and from the Irish government. That's not the case at all. I think it's actually a real sweet spot is us helping assist companies looking to go over for the first time, whether it be one person. We've heard from Sean, they've got nearly 200 people in the US now. When they first initially entered, it would have been a relatively small investment and number of people on the ground supporting that contract. So you're definitely not too small, and the US government and the US market's open for these kind of early stage companies to choose the US as a destination to locate in, and location.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's coming up to 11 o'clock, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. I'd like to thank Connor, Sean, and Cillian for the great discussion. Thanks to SelectUSA for partnering on the session too. Thanks to Vicky from our events team at Chamber for all her help in making this event possible. And finally, thanks to everyone who joined us today. If you have any further questions, please reach out to us. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer them. And check out corkchamber.ie for news and upcoming events. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, Cal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.